Well, good evening again, President Turner, Dr. Woodson, members of the board. We have some members of our schools division, Mr. Doss, Mrs. Piper, and myself this evening. So we'll be kind of doing a dance up here, back and forth between some slides. So bear with us as we're transitioning. But I wanted to start by thanking you for the opportunity for us to share with you this evening our reimagining work that we've done. Reimagining teaching and learning and elevating our schools beyond IB is the focus of this presentation.
We're going to try to minimize that extra block so you can see the full slides. The public can see the full slides, but your view here shows that big block. Thank you.
So first, we want to just say thank you to the board for assisting us with this initial launch as we thought about teaching and learning visioning over the summer of this past summer 2020, prior to us engaging in broad-based stakeholder feedback that we started in the fall, where we created and implemented surveys throughout the district, both a common general community survey as well as a certified staff survey, where we asked our community to give us feedback. We met with multiple stakeholder groups, and we wanted them to kind of tell us what should be our priorities moving forward as a district. That comes after, if you recall, us publishing a new 5-year district strategic plan this past July. And so some of the feedback that we received is listed here for you. As far as major priorities listed there, culturally responsive instructional strategies, collaborative planning, student voice, choice, and agency, professional learning communities, social emotional learning, and educational neuroscience were all shared priorities based on that feedback we received. We also asked what were some strategies or some practices that we wanted to reconsider or even discontinue to take off the plates of our educators. And it was very evident that there were practices that were related to some of the rigidity of some of the IB requirements that people wanted us to reconsider or discontinue. We also know that via the district strategic plan, one of the strategies under equitable achievement as our priority 1 was to reimagine or revise our common teaching and learning vision. And then finally, other feedback we received from the general survey spoke to our community's interest in us growing the financial literacy in our students, growth mindset, technology integration, and goal setting for real world problems and application.
Good evening. So based on this information that we received back from stakeholders, we developed what we feel are the core beliefs of this new vision. On this slide, you will see these. I'm going to talk through them, and then I am going to read them so we all hear them firsthand. But based on these beliefs, we believe wholeheartedly that we will be doing what is best for all the students in our buildings. We will be taking what we learned from International Baccalaureate as well as latest research on culture responsive teaching and high leverage strategies for success in classrooms. We are committed to the students we serve, and our teachers acknowledge the identities of the students in their room and approaches they need to implement for their students. The objective of this transition is for high achievement based on our district strategic goals as well for all students in our buildings. So we believe that equitable schools operate with a fundamental belief that every student in every classroom can and will elevate their learning to the highest potential if there are high expectations for culturally responsive, student-centered instruction, our students participate in a socially, physically, and intellectually safe learning community where their identities and voices are affirmed, valued, and represented. A strong teacher and student learning partnership is cultivated with a balance of support, feedback, and productive struggle to grow student independence and self-efficacy. And our educators model a growth mindset and commit to purposeful collaboration and professional learning.
This slide focuses on really what happens when this vision becomes a reality. In other words, what are our takeaways for our students? And so in that, and I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm going to highlight a few. And so every student will be well-rounded and have appropriate social emotional skills. We know that our task is to provide students with the academic skills to be successful in life. But we also want them to have the social emotional skills to be successful and be life ready when they leave our school district. Be critical readers and writers and speakers. Again, this kind of goes without saying, but we know these are critical skills for students to be successful in life. Understand their own strengths and challenges as learners using a growth mindset. Now, this really applies to staff and students, as we must understand that the value of modeling, demonstrating, and growing through trial and error and mistakes is an important part of being successful in life and being part of life's journey. So we need to make that a focus for our staff as well as our students. We need to be able to explore multiple pathways to demonstrate understanding as well as explore different careers and areas of interest through our studies. We know that we need to provide students with more exposure to various careers, including internships and apprenticeships, as we talked about earlier tonight, so that they have some sense of what they're interested in and not interested in when they, prior to high school graduation. They need to be able to think critically about and stand up against social injustice. Given where we are as a society and a world, we need to help our students know and understand the value of standing up against social injustice so they can make our world a better place, and in doing so, create more bystanders and, more upstanders and fewer bystanders. We need our students to be globally minded citizens, very much aligning with IB. In order for us to know and understand social injustices, we need to have a strong understanding of those beyond our sphere of influence. And lastly, our students need to demonstrate a love of learning. Our students need to understand the importance and value of learning over their entire course of their lives and know that learning should never stop.
And so in thinking about reimagining new teaching and learning vision, we know that alignment with the district strategic plan is critical. And in that alignment, what we hope to aspire to do is make sure that our priorities are the forefront of our professional development and our coaching and our work in our schools with our staff. And in order to do that, one of the things to reconsider is taking away some of the trainings and some of the requirements of other professional development that has taken priority in the past. We are expected to have certain IB training requirements met, and sometimes we've felt in the past that those are sometimes getting in the way of us moving forward. And so an objective here would be to focus our trainings moving forward on more cultural responsive teaching practice, continuing our work with effective literacy and math practices, prioritizing acceleration and intervention for students, as well as making sure we have a very solid multi-tiered system of support in place for all of our learners. In doing so, we additionally want to provide our schools and our educators with a little more flexibility to meet kids where they are by reducing some of the restrictions of IB moving forward. And so with that, I want to introduce to you the new vision, Elevate, the next level of teaching and learning in equitable, affirming, and responsive schools. Equitable, affirming, and responsive would be ideally replacing the tagline or vision statement that our district currently has, which is superior schools in a supportive community. Elevate as a framework has 4 key areas that are represented in the core belief statements that Mrs. Piper shared with you earlier. Those key areas are learning community, teacher-student partnership, professional learning, and responsive instruction. Proceeding in this area, all of our professional development, our teacher appraisal processes in this district would focus on those 4 areas. The stars represented in the, or the star, excuse me, represented in the V in Elevate is a symbol of our students. And you can see those stars and those students on the outside of those 4 key areas. And the smaller bubbles represent our intended outcomes. So we want our students to be collaborative and creative, well-rounded, globally minded, critical thinkers, readers and writers, social justice advocates, problem solvers, reflective, and lifelong learners. To revisit those belief statements, you'll see it better represented a second time that you review this after seeing our framework. You see equitable, affirmed, and responsive in those belief statements in bold. You also see learning partnership, learning community, a responsive instruction, and professional learning are those 4 key areas represented in those belief statements.
We recognize that there are probably many questions revolving around the change and what this will look like for our students. So we'll take some time to address some of these potential questions at this time. What have we learned from IB, or International Baccalaureate, implementation? As previously mentioned, we have learned so much through our trainings and incorporation of the International Baccalaureate framework. We very much appreciate the private donations from our community members through the Advancement Center, which assisted in these trainings. The use of the donated funds primarily funded professional development and training for our staff, which will continue to have positive impacts in our new teaching and learning vision. On this slide, you will find some areas that have led to student and teacher growth. Teachers are more focused on inquiry-based learning, as well as student voice, choice, and agency. And you heard student voice, choice, and agency was a priority were priorities that came out from our stakeholders. Teachers are incorporating more globally minded, culturally focused, inquiry-based instruction into their units due to the professional development and trainings and focus that we have incorporated into our teaching staff development in the last 10 years. When we first began the International Baccalaureate journey, goals were outlined for the success of the program and transfer of knowledge to our students. The first goal was to increase graduation rate and decrease the achievement gap. As you can see from the data on this slide, the graduation rate did in fact increase in the last 10 years. However, the achievement gap between our Black and Brown students and white students is still a significant concern, which is addressed in the district strategic plan with aggressive goals for equitable achievement. Since we implemented IB approximately 10 years ago, the state standardized assessment has changed 3 times, and the state also has significantly changed our standards for learning at each grade level. Therefore, it is not possible to show a direct comparison of the racial achievement gap from 10 years ago compared to current data, but we know it is still in need of improvement in this area. The second goal was to prepare our students for the global economy by providing international content. This was accomplished through the different content and learning structures put into place during the unit planners. The 5th grade exhibition and personal project from the high schoolers afforded the students the opportunity to put these skills into practice, as many students focused on global goals, problems, and solutions. Through the International Baccalaureate framework, the district wanted to equip students with skills to learn. These were referred to the approaches to learning within the units as teachers developed them. These included social skills, research skills, thinking skills, communication skills, and self-management skills. These were incorporated into the unit planners and also were strongly demonstrated in the projects, as I referred to before, the exhibition and personal projects. Another goal of the International Baccalaureate framework was to develop responsible citizens in relation to language and culture. This was achieved through students being exposed to Spanish language and cultural events incorporated into lessons and units. The last goal was to be Indiana's first district kindergarten through 12th international district-wide program. This demonstrates that, as you can see on this slide, that we have been successful in many areas that we put forth 10 years ago when we started the journey. So we will continue with many of these great practices, as well as enhance our practices for equitable achievement with this new vision.
Why do we need to move beyond IB to elevate teaching and learning in our schools? Over the last few years, the teaching and learning team has been reviewing student achievement data, and it's linked to our current instructional framework and has come to the conclusion that while IB is working well for some, it is not working well for all, as some students are not getting what they need to be successful academically and social emotionally. We need to provide teachers with more time to better meet the needs of all students, and IB has some built-in restrictions that take extensive time away from teachers. For example, we have mandated assessment rubrics that do not easily align with student-based, standards-based grading practices. Secondary teachers must grade things using the MYP 8-point rubric for, on average, about 160 students, and then convert it to a standard percentage to align with our grading scale. In other words, duplication of effort on a high level. There are inherent advantages to grouping some students across grade levels, but PYP will not allow that, and that has been a huge disadvantage. The authorization and accreditation process that is extremely time-consuming for educators, coordinators, and administrators. This is actually a significant amount of work stretched out over an entire year. As we do the self-study, the time dedicated to that work is extensive, and again, takes away time from teaching and learning and the focus of students that really needs to be in place. And lastly, the world language requirement for all students takes away options for students to choose other courses of higher interest and sometimes serves an additional barrier for students who are struggling as readers in their home language. So in that situation, we have students who are struggling, maybe at the middle school, who are struggling, maybe reading at a second or third grade level, but we're asking them sometimes to learn a second language, which is a good thing, but oftentimes a daunting task when they're really not proficient in their home language. It also keeps students from picking some courses that they might be interested in, like, for example, STEM offerings that we have, but if we're required to take a world language, then that might not be an option. What are the financial implications of the vision transition? Currently, we're spending about $90,000 annually to IB-related fees and evaluation expenses. Now, what does that look like? Where does that come from? About $81,000 annually are spent on the fees that we pay for each school to be a part of the International Baccalaureate program. When you factor in the cost of the accreditation or evaluation process on an annual basis, it works out to an additional $9,000 a year. So hence we're spending $90,000 a year for this. Now, if we move away from this, there will be some things we'll have to address. Obviously, we have signage in terms of formal signage and banners that are present throughout our buildings. Obviously, there's be some dollars involved in removing those pieces. But at the same time, those won't be ongoing. They'll be one-time expenses. And what can we do? With that additional $90,000 a year, we hope to be able to redirect those funds into professional development, to train our teachers to become more proficient in what they're doing, although they're obviously already doing a lot of great things. In addition to that, we think that some of that could also be used to support students. Which instructional best practices will we continue to elevate student achievement? As you look at this list, knowing what you know about IB, you'll see an awful lot of overlap. So in this situation, as we transition, if we are able to transition away from PYP and MYP, there clearly is no need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are a number of best practices that teachers have been trained in and are considered instructional best practices outside of the IB framework. Our teachers incorporate them, students respond well to them, so there's really no need to abandon them. The list you'll see below is pretty extensive, but for the sake of time, I'm going to highlight just a few. The strategies of inquiry and problem solving. Many of our teachers have already received extensive training in this area and know very well how to integrate this and incorporate it into instruction. We know it's good for students, and we'll continue to train new teachers in these areas as well. Let's keep it going. Student voice, choice, and agency. We're just getting started to a point where we're gaining momentum in this area, and it aligns very well with the culturally responsive teaching that we've been talking about. So that's a process that we want to, or a strategy we want to keep going as well. Curriculum relevant to student cultures. Again, this also aligns exceptionally well with our culturally responsive work. There's a need to keep that piece going. Global mindset. Students still need to understand and value life beyond Indianapolis and Marion County. So this part will remain as well. Collaboration. Dr. Taylor talked about the feedback that we received not only from our teaching staff, our classified staff, and our community. Collaboration is a big part of that. It will continue to be as we continue to focus on professional learning communities and that collaboration that teachers need on a regular basis. In addition, STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's been a part of IB through the design cycle, and as you know, we've expanded those offerings at the secondary level, especially with Project Lead the Way and the courses offered at the Career Center and CTE. but we see that need to continue to grow, and that'll be a part of that. MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support piece that we've been as we transition from the response to instruction and intervention, that piece will continue. We know we need to do everything we can to support students on a high level. Formerly personal project and the 5th grade exhibition. While if we move away from IB, we won't formally have those pieces, but we continue to see a need for culminating projects. In fact, we see a need to expand that, moving beyond just 5th grade and 10th grade, so that you can have a culminating experience in a variety of levels, and we see that as being a critical piece. And last but not least, you can see there that the DP program or the diploma program that is part of IB, it's been in our district since 1988. That piece will still continue, provided we have a positive enrollment, but we don't see a need at this point to dismantle that piece. And we know we have a lot of students, a lot of families who choose to go to North Central because of that very program. And so with that, the other thing that you'll notice here is that, as I said, these are things that teachers have been doing. Okay, so moving in this direction is not going to put additional things on teachers' plate. It will give us an opportunity to hone and get better at the things that we're currently doing.
It's important to think about research when you're designing and building for the future for teaching and learning. And an authority in educational research is a man by the name of John Hattie. And he conducted a meta-analysis of over 800 research studies pertaining to practices and strategies that best influence learning outcomes in kids. And it was published originally in 2008. It was a book called Visible Learning that is referenced quite often by teachers in this district and other districts around really the globe. That 2008 version was just updated in 2012 with further research. And so we took a look at some of those practices, and this list is not exhaustive of the practices that are going to be keyed in on within our framework of Elevate. But to call your attention to a few, I wanted to do so this evening. Teacher-student relationships is proven to greatly influence learning outcomes, and that is grounded in our core belief of learning partnerships. Cooperative learning and problem solving, that collaboration we want to see in our classrooms, that's grounded in learning community. Deliberate practice and scaffolding conducted by that teacher and getting to know our students and getting to know what they need in terms of supports with that differentiated instruction, that's grounded in responsive instruction. Formative evaluation, which is so critical to knowing where your students are and then providing interventions for those students to accelerate their learning needs, that's grounded in responsive instruction and professional learning. And then last, and the most powerful of all, as Hattie concludes, is collective teacher efficacy. And that is really the fundamental belief that we as a team of teachers can do and put things in place to achieve high levels for our students, to get our students to maximize their learning potential. And we're talking about all students. So we know that's a fundamental belief that drives action for our teachers and improves outcomes for our students.
I know you're probably thinking it's been a long night. I thought I'd seen this slide before, and you're right. We wanted to share this slide for a second time, just for emphasis, as we want our parents and the community to see that these are the student takeaways, the things that the students as they matriculate from our district, the things that we want them to have, the skills we want them to have, so that they can ultimately be successful in life and be lifelong learners. So how will the new vision for teaching and learning elevate teachers and school staff? And in that piece, teachers and building leaders have been under pressure for quite some time in terms of state assessments, in terms of federal assessments, and they feel the pressure. Even though as a district, we've oftentimes said, we're interested in educating the whole child, but at the same time, they hear it. And they know when parents ask questions, they ask about those things. When they go out to great schools, they see that information. So there's a lot of stress there. So we feel like as we shift away. We can place maybe a greater emphasis on standards-based instruction so that our kids would stand a chance to do a little better in those. And we also know that at the high school level, until next year, those students had a graduation exam that was absolutely driven by those tests. And so we feel like we'll be putting students in a better position to be effective there. In addition, the goal of this transition is to remove low yield responsibilities from teaching and learning process to better focus on key priorities. Earlier, I mentioned those things that while a part of IB are cumbersome and things that oftentimes take the teacher's focus and effort away from the students. And so this, by addressing the aspects of IB, that if we remove away, we would have that opportunity to better focus on students. And the new vision will reduce duplication of effort and time, and because we know teachers must focus on the right work.
Which staff positions will be reimagined with the modified roles and responsibilities? During this transition, no jobs will be lost, but some will be repositioned. As stated on this slide, staff members will be transitioned to positions in which they are licensed and qualified to fill. Some positions at the different levels will change with the new vision. Because world language will not be a special at the elementary level, the world language instructional assistants will become instructional assistants at the building level. Regardless of the shift away from IB, this was going to occur to originally make this a teaching position. We will reposition those teaching positions to incorporate more multilingual supports into classrooms for our students. Students in the elementary schools will now have technology and media weekly. The technology special will be moving into a technology, coding, and eventually incorporate more STEM activities, as Mr. Doss mentioned earlier, in the future. The elementary librarians were the PYP coordinators as well, or primary years program coordinators as well. Now they will be librarians and continue to offer coaching support and resources for content areas. The MYP, or middle years program coordinators, will be librarians also and offer coaching support as well. The district IB coach position will be repositioned to a district multi-systems of support coach. So that position will change into a new position that we will have to have supports in for our students. We've also had some questions about the dual language immersion program at Willow Lake, wondering if that was going away because people have asked in our other presentations regarding world language. That program will remain at Willow Lake with this new vision, and we will continue to review the interest in the program for possible expansion in the future.
What is the timeline for implementation? It would be the 21-22 school year. We still have a lot of things to work through, and we also want to give teachers some opportunities this summer and to begin working and putting pieces in place. We've dedicated some resources and funding to do that, even though, again, this is not going to be this ridiculous shift. But at the same time, we want everyone to feel that they're in a good place when school starts next year. So that would be the timeline, but you wouldn't see anything new until next year.
So what is the stance of WTA on the transition? We've had ongoing dialogue with WTA throughout this process, and we'll continue to do so as we continue to build the details of our new vision. But the two key pieces that I want to draw your attention to as it relates to this statement is first, the support that WTA has stated providing the district move toward this vision. There is a support for a greater emphasis on culturally responsive teaching and learning throughout the district. And then secondly, there is support behind moving away from PYP and MYP because of IB authorization requirements is believed to be necessary at this time based on the needs of our students and moving forward. So additionally, looking at March 24th of the next board meeting, when this moves into an action item, coming along with that will be approval of a first reading of policies where IB language is reiterated throughout those policies listed before you. So I will be coming back to you with the first read of those policies and the revisions that come along with them. Additionally, we'll look at a revised board resolution for this part of the process as well. And I do want to reiterate that part of that comes along with adopting a new vision or tagline, vision statement or tagline, as I previously referenced, and it's listed there in the bottom left corner. Equitable, affirming, responsive, replacing superior schools, supportive community. So what happens post March 24th? By March 26th, we would want to make sure we shared the new vision for teaching and learning with staff and families. By the end of April, we would want to obviously update language in our district strategic plan and continue with that full alignment in our school improvement plans. So again, to reiterate, as previously mentioned, one of our strategies in our priority number 1 is to come up with or redevelop a common teaching and learning vision. And so that will live in each of our school improvement plans as well as we work on supporting this development from a professional development, coaching, and teacher appraisal process. And that will live in our school improvement plans as well. We do have plans to mail a community brief or infographic regarding this, and as well as other district celebrations out to our community by the end of April. By the end of May, present to some key areas, key groups in our community, which include the Advancement Center, Parent Council Network, and the Community Coalition. And then by fall of 2021, we would have this included in Dr. Woodson's State of the Schools Superintendent's Address, provided that we're allowed to go out into our schools as we previously have done prior to COVID to share those State of Schools address. And then we'd also ask that our schools to continue or add it to their school-based communications to their families and PTOs.
I wanted to reiterate in your board documents, not a part of this specific presentation, are the modifications to the district strategic plan that we are suggesting to align with what you've heard tonight. So I know that sometimes support documents get lost in translation, but would encourage you to take a moment to review that, because that is something we're asking you to vote on next board meeting.